I am Tim Carmen. I'm a food writer with the Washington Post, and I'm honored to moderate this panel. We have a very distinguished panel. On my far left, it's Spike Mendelsohn. He's a chef, restaurateur, author. He's also chair of the DC Food Policy Council, an organization that works with regulatory and private organizations involved in the local food economy. Next to Spike is Evan Lutz, is the CEO and co-founder of Hungry Harvest, and also the other one to wear a jacket today. Hungry Harvest is a fresh produce delivery service committed to tackling food waste and hunger. And to my immediate left is Seth Goldman. He is the co-founder and current, let me if I get this correct, TEO emeritus of Honest Tea. Grown. He also serves as the executive chairman of Beyond Meat. We'll talk about that later. A company committed to replacing animal protein with plant protein. So our subject, as you know, is the future of food. And Seth, let's turn straight to you. Right. You are dealing with it with your new company, Beyond Meat, which we've written about, and I've tasted Beyond Meat. It's amazing. I mean, it is a plant-based product that mimics a hamburger, and it has juices, and it tastes beefy. It has a texture. Like if most vegetarian, burgers, they don't have the texture. Yeah. And you managed to create this. Tell us a little bit about the product.
Sure. So, I've been a vegetarian for 13 years, and I've always felt like the veggie burger was the consolation prize, kind of in fact, if you had wanted to come up with a strategy to discourage people from being vegetarian, the veggie burger would be a great strategy because it's consistently dissatisfying. And so at Beyond Meat, we did an MRI of a hamburger and said, let's understand the structure, at a deeper level, rather than just put a bunch of plants together, and how are the fats connected to the proteins, and how are they interlaced in a way that preserves the moisture of it. So it's really very science-driven, but then we use all the components that are from the plant kingdom. So meat is basically an assembly of fats, proteins, water, and some minerals. All of those exist in the plant kingdom, and through lots of trial and error and science, we managed to put them together in a way that still meets Whole Foods standards around natural ingredients. And it's the first product that is able to be merchandised in the meat section at Whole Foods, and that's really the change, right? So if you want to sell to vegetarians, the 5% of the population that are the committed folks, you sell in the freezer. If you want to reach everybody else, you sell in the meat section. And if the product warrants that, then it's a great opportunity to change the diet, to expose more people to plant protein, and to be part of the spectrum of choice when people are thinking about a cookout.
Well, and let me remind, I know we've got a short amount of time, but if you do have questions, please send them to the hashtag #PostLive, and we'll try to get to them. I wanted to follow up, because I think it's interesting, and I think the whole conference this afternoon has given people plenty of reasons not to eat red meat, given the damage to the environment and to health to a certain degree. But does it take a processed vegetable product to get people to eat our vegetables?
Yeah. Well, it was funny. So when I told my co-founder from Honest Tea, Barry Nelbuff, I told him I was going to get more involved with Honest Tea. He said, well, wouldn't it be better if people just ate lentil salads and sort of made their own food? And I said, well, Barry, yes. And of course, it would be ideal if everyone could brew their own tea at home and bring it around in thermoses. But we've made a pretty viable business out of brewing tea, organic tea for them. And so you have to, when we're talking about changing the diet, you've got to meet people where they are. And so people right now are, the burger is the single biggest protein occasion there is for people, American consumers. So let's meet that occasion and let's perfectly replicate it so that there isn't the more you ask people to change their behavior, the harder you are going to have being able to access them. So let's make it as accessible as we can. And it is, yes, there is a process to it, but frankly, a hamburger meat goes through a process as well, right? The cow has 2 different acid tanks. It's got a lot of other compounds and chemicals that go into it. So it's a question of which process you're willing to go with.
Is there, I guess I would wonder if what's the energy amount
Yeah.
necessary to make like a pound of Beyond Meat versus
So we are in the process of looking at that in a really systematic way, but just think about it this way. The involved, what it takes to feed, to create a pound of beef is 14 months worth of grains and water to feed a cow. And of the cow, maybe 40% of it is usable and convertible into that final product. So there's a lot of waste. With our plants, we're using probably less than what a cow eats in a week, or maybe even in a day, and converting that into protein. So dramatically different environmental footprint.
Well, speaking of waste, that leads into actually both Evan and Spike are dealing with food waste. But Evan, let's start with you. You've started a company dedicated to it, and I understand this grew out of sort of a college experience for you.
It did, yeah. So I went to the University of Maryland. Both my parents went to Maryland, my aunts, my uncles, even my grandma went to Maryland. So it runs really deep in my family. And when I was there, I started working for this organization called Food Recovery Network. And basically they take leftover dining hall food that would normally get thrown away at the end of the day, use student volunteers to drive down to a partner agency such as a food bank or another nonprofit. We got approached by a supplier of surplus fruits and vegetables, which I had no idea that they were really going to waste at the time. I was a senior in college. This was October 2013. They had the supply of excess products from farms, and they wanted us to sell them to college students. I said, sure, why not? I did it for an internship for Food Recovery Network. I also used it as a class project. It was this little farm stand I set up in the basement of my dorm and sold 5 pounds of produce for $5. All of it otherwise would have gone to waste. First week I started, we had 10 students come up and buy from us. And the next week it was 20. Next week it was 30, and then it was 40. Weather got nice. We moved outside to Stamp, then it was 50, 100, 300, 500. So it was really becoming a viable business. This was May 2014. My entire life, all I've ever wanted to do was start a social business, and a business that not only made money, but also gave back to the community in some way. So in May 2014, I turned that model of that little farm stand that we started just basically in my dorm into Hungry Harvest. And today we deliver all over the Mid-Atlantic surplus or ugly or recovered produce that would otherwise be thrown away because of its odd size or shape or because of logistical inefficiencies. I can go on and on about why produce goes to waste. The reasons are absolutely ludicrous. So, for example, blueberries that a grocery store orders in 6-ounce cases actually arrive in 4.4-ounce cases, and they'll kick the entire load. And now all of a sudden, that whoever contracted the freight has to get rid of that produce somewhere, right? Oftentimes, it'll either wind up in the landfill or be sold as animal feed. It's not a proper use of produce when it was just a 1.6-ounce difference in the case. I don't think that's a really proper reason for food to go to waste. Other reasons are kale stems. We have a farmer down in Florida who the first crop of kale that he grows every single year, actually the stems are way too soft to sell. And so normally he would just leave them in the field, or actually, even worse, just leave them on the side of a road somewhere, right? But we were able to procure them and actually rescue them from going to waste. So there are ridiculous reasons why produce goes to waste, and it's not because it's bad or moldy or rotten. It gets that way because nobody eats it, right? And so we're working towards the front ends, the way back end, excuse me, of the value chain, right where it's grown and right in the wholesalers where we can recover it, sell it to our customers, and also subsidize and donate produce for those in need.
So your model is to take this produce, or seconds as it's often called in the business, and try to sell them at a discounted price to consumers who typically don't buy this because it's not pretty enough. How do you convince them? Because I'm that way too. It's like, if I see an apple that has,
Sure.
like a clear hole in it that looked like maybe there was some sort of animal living in it,
Sure.
I'm not going to buy it.
So,
how do you convince people to think, okay, I'm going to give you my money for something that I wouldn't go buy at the local store?
So a couple things. One, if you compare our box of produce to something you'd randomly pick out at a farmer's market or a grocery store, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. I mean, we sold apples a couple weeks ago that had very, very small brown dots. I forgot what the term was, but small brown dots. And to the naked eye, to the untrained eye, you wouldn't even know that would go to waste, right? The second thing is, if you walk down a grocery store aisle, right, you see everything that's the same size, the same shape, the same color, and you might wonder how do they get everything to grow the same exact way? Well, the fact is it doesn't. There's weather, there's different natural forces that make things grow different ways. And so if you've ever been to a farm, you realize that things are all different shapes and sizes, and I don't think we should discriminate produce based on how it looks. I think we should discriminate on based on how it tastes, right? Right. Not just produce, yeah, exactly.
So bite into the worm.
And how is that argument working? Do people buy it?
People love it. You know, my true mission in life is to democratize healthy food. That means democratize is make accessible to everybody, right? So I want to make sure that everybody can have access. Everybody, you know, eating healthy should be a right in this country, not a privilege. And in a country where we're wasting 6 billion pounds of produce every single year, you've got to be kidding me that you might walk, you know, we're in the Washington Post building today. If you walk 3 miles that way into Anacostia, you'll see kids that have never even tasted a strawberry. And that's a travesty to me. I think that's a travesty, and I've devoted my life to making sure that we can try and solve this problem through supply and demand, through entrepreneurship. And I want to see other companies that are starting, and we are seeing other companies that are starting to, jump on this ugly produce trend and starting to sell in their grocery stores and starting to sell it to consumers, which I think is a great thing, that people are finally waking up and realizing that produce, it shouldn't go to waste for these reasons that I just listed, and I can go on and on about, other reasons why it would go to waste.
Well, I know, Spike, you're also involved with a app, I believe, that is dealing with food waste.
Yeah, so recently, last year, we got involved with Food Rescue, which is I'd like to describe it as the Uber of food waste. I think there's a lot of ownership to take as small business owners, whether in your restaurants where a lot of food may go to waste. If there's some leftover food or the night's over, you don't know what to do with it. There's a place for that food, and I think a lot of small business owners were scared of the liabilities of donating food to people that need it, right? But I think the interesting part is that in 1995 we passed the Bill Emerson Act, which actually kind of states you're not liable if you're gracious enough to donate your food to somebody else, right? So I think that's a piece of legislation we need to revive a little bit and make a little bit more, maybe even amend, to make it a little bit better. But Food Rescue app works really easy. Basically, it's volunteer based, which I really enjoy. Anybody in this room today can actually sign up, get on the app, and go do a food rescue. And they make it very easy. You just if you have 20 minutes to spare or an hour to spare, you log on to this app, you look where there's a food rescue available. It's usually at a small business. We, the pizza, partake, so all our leftover pizza we donate at the end of the day. Some volunteer comes and picks it up and takes it directly to somewhere where it's in need, where people eat it. I participate as well. My restaurants participate in the Food Rescue app, but I as well do runs myself. I find myself many times in the city where it's 5 o'clock and I don't want to drive back home because of all the traffic. I got maybe 20 or half an hour to spare. I'll just log on the app and look for Food Rescue, and it's amazing the people on the receiving end. Their smiles when you're walking into the door with warm food that's packaged well, and these guys are getting a really, really good meal, and it's getting donated where otherwise it would have probably went to waste in some shape or another.
So I'm just curious, how does Food Rescue subsidize its services? Where does it get its money from?
Well, that is probably not a question for me to answer, because I'm solely an advisor of the Food Rescue and a participator. So I would probably ask them
to find out.
Yeah.
That's my job. So I have a question from Twitter. It says, can waste, if unfit for human consumption, be a valuable asset for feeding livestock? This may be also above our pay grade.
Yeah, it's a little bit of maybe not yours.
Well, no, I mean, we don't deal with really livestock feed, right? But what I'm going to say is, our mission shouldn't be we shouldn't be focused on reducing food waste and feeding it to livestock. We should look further up the value chain and say, how can we reduce it from going to waste in the first place, right? And so it doesn't become livestock feed. That's where our focus should be. In the unfortunate situation that it does have to go into compost for livestock feed, I think that's a perfectly appropriate thing for it to do if it is moldy or bad or unfit for human consumption. But our focus shouldn't be on what to do when it gets moldy. It should be on how to prevent it from getting moldy, right?
Yeah. I mean, and I always say like the cure to food waste is going to be the sum of a lot of small, gracious acts, right? And like small ideas that end up really being big and making a big impact. So, for instance, like I always challenge people to go in their refrigerator at the end of the week and just like challenge yourself to come out with, instead of ordering on an app or Uber Eats or getting something delivered or going out, just challenge yourself to as a competition with a family or friends, what you can create out of the fridge to make those ingredients go a long way. Because we all know, like, you pull out the drawers, you'll get some kale that's looking a little wilted, or you'll get some carrots that are starting to sour or something like that. But we got to prevent that. So making more use and be creative of your refrigerator, I think, is a really great place that every single one of you can start.
Yep.
So.
I like to call it the produce coffin. You know, that drawer you open up and like after a couple weeks, everything's moldy inside. Not everything is supposed to be stored in there, right? There's lettuce, for example. Everybody puts in the fridge, but actually, if you put it in a vase like flowers, it'll actually stay a lot fresher for a couple weeks even, and don't even refrigerate it.
And I think that's another part, like the education process of what good food is and spoilage, and really, having like a little bit more of an idea of what all that is important as well. So.
Well, and Spike, let me ask you, because we were talking yesterday about another initiative that you've been dealing with. It was like trying to get younger people involved with farming. And I was looking at some numbers today, and it's really astounding. I mean, the average age of an American farmer, it's like the average age is 58 years old.
It's a dying breed right now, and that's something we have to fix. We have this bigger agro farming happening, and what happened is it uninspired a lot of young farmers that came from farming families. And you grew up learning how to farm, and you look at your future, and there's no farming to do, right? So what do? You move to a little bit more urban areas. You take a job that maybe wasn't really on your path or what you wanted to do, but there's a lot of talented people in these urban areas. So what I was saying with you is, I feel since we're growing more urban farms, and there's greenhouses, and there's more plots of land to use, and we're really trying to take advantage of all these spaces in the city, I think we need to revive young farmers, right? There's so much great technology coming out on how to grow produce at a rate 1,000 times faster, more nutritional. And I think we really need to get some grants going and inspire some young farmers, because I think that's going to, at the end of the day, is going to be our future. The world has a funny way of just going in circles, and I think we're really going to go back to farming, and whether it's in rural areas or urban areas, I think it's going to be something that's very important. So,
if I can just make a comment here, farmers are often seen as single-minded, narrow-minded, and just simple people. They're actually business owners. They're scientists. They're meteorologists. They have to pay attention to the weather. They pay attention to the landscape and figure out how to sell it. It's not a simple profession. It's very, very complicated. And once young people realize that, there's a huge opportunity actually in farming. That how interesting it is. There's science. There's math. There's business principles that are involved with farming, instead of just this like, oh, we're going to grow some crops. I think once people realize that, then a lot more young people will start to go into farming.
I love that you brought that up. I mean, some of the most educated people that I've ever dealt with or had the liberty of having conversations with have been farmers that are like covered in shit and wearing boots and like doing all of this stuff. And you go out there and you meet them and you talk to them and you're like, oh my God, like we got to tell these stories. We got to let people know what's going on. Like people don't see this and they need to. So love that you brought that up.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm wondering, like, so 6% of farmers today are under 35 years old. That does not seem like we've got a future generation of farmers lined up. How do you even get them interested in it? And does there have to be a public investment in this to convert old structures into vertical farms? Or, I mean, what is it going to take to get people to, get back into farming?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I'm enjoying right now with the Food Policy Council here in DC